Everyone told him not to do it. The shelter staff begged him to pick another dog, any other dog. He's too aggressive, they warned. He's bitten before. He can't be trusted. But when Officer Mark Jensen looked into the German Shepherd's trembling eyes through the cage, he didn't see danger. He saw pain. Something broken. And waiting to heal. The moment Mark reached out his hand, the dog growled, but didn't bite. Their eyes locked, and something inside both of them shifted. No one knew that day would mark the beginning of a story that would silence every doubter and prove that sometimes the most broken souls make the greatest heroes. The sound of barking echoed through the cold concrete hallways as Officer Mark Jensen walked into the city animal shelter. He wasn't there on duty. He was there searching for something he'd lost months ago. Since his canine partner, Rex, passed away in the line of duty, the silence in his home had become unbearable. But as he moved past the rows of cages, one set of eyes stopped him. That a massive German Shepherd stood in the corner, muscles tense, eyes burning with distrust. The name tag read Shadow. The shelter worker stepped forward quickly. "Sir, you don't want that one. He's dangerous. 3 failed adoptions. He bites. He doesn't trust anyone." Mark crouched beside the cage, studying the dog. Shadow growled softly, his tail low, not angry, just scared. Mark saw something in those trembling eyes that no one else did. Pain, confusion, and a flicker of hope. The worker shook her head. "You're making a mistake, officer." Mark slowly reached a hand toward the bars. "Maybe," he murmured, "but everyone deserves one more chance." Shadow didn't move. He just stared. And in that silent moment, Mark knew his decision was already made. The drive home was silent. Shadow sat in the back seat, eyes darting to every sound, muscles tense like a coiled spring. Mark kept glancing in the mirror, speaking softly. "You're safe now, buddy. No one's going to hurt you." But the dog's expression stayed hard, unreadable. When they reached home, Shadow refused to leave the car. Mark didn't pull. He waited. After several long minutes, Shadow finally stepped out, sniffing the air cautiously. Inside, he paced the living room, circling every corner before curling up near the door, as if still expecting to be thrown out. That night, thunder rolled outside. Mark woke to find Shadow trembling behind the couch, eyes wide with fear. He didn't approach, just sat quietly nearby, speaking in a calm, steady voice until the dog's breathing slowed. The next morning, Mark found Shadow waiting by the kitchen table, eyes softer now, cautious but curious. When Mark reached out his hand, Shadow hesitated, then placed his paw gently on it. It was small, uncertain, but real. For the first time, Mark saw something that hadn't been there before. Not fear, not anger, but trust beginning to bloom. Weeks passed, and Shadow slowly began to change. His once constant growling faded into cautious silence. He followed Mark around the house, watching his every move, learning his tone, his rhythm. Mark started taking him on short walks through the park, always with care, always gentle. People stared, whispering about that dangerous dog from the shelter. But Mark ignored them. One sunny afternoon, as children played nearby, a man's trash bag suddenly burst open with a loud pop. The sound echoed like a gunshot. In an instant, Shadow snapped. He lunged, barking viciously, eyes wild with panic. Parents screamed, pulling their kids away. Mark's heart raced. He tightened his grip on the leash, but didn't yell. He spoke softly, firmly. "It's okay, Shadow. You're safe." The dog's body trembled violently, tail tucked tight. For a moment, Mark saw the terrified creature trapped inside the hardened shell. He knelt, resting a hand on Shadow's back. The growling faded, replaced by heavy, broken whimpers. That night, Mark sat alone on the porch, thinking about what happened. He finally understood. Shadow's aggression wasn't hatred. It was pain that hadn't healed. From that day, Mark made it his mission to show the dog the world wasn't his enemy, that he was his only friend. It was just after sunset when chaos erupted on the street. Mark and Shadow were finishing their evening walk when the sharp scent of smoke hit the air. In seconds, they saw it, a nearby house engulfed in flames, orange light flickering through the windows. Screams echoed faintly from inside. "Call 911. Mark shouted to a neighbor as he ran closer. The heat was unbearable, the fire crackling louder with every step. Shadow began barking frantically, pulling at the leash, trying to rush in. Mark grabbed his collar. "No, It's too dangerous. But the dog wouldn't stop. His instincts screamed louder than fear. Then, through the roar of fire, came a child's cry. Without hesitation, Shadow tore free and charged toward the house. Mark's heart dropped. He sprinted after him, coughing through the thick smoke. Moments felt endless. Then a sound, a low bark. Through the shattered window, Shadow appeared, dragging a small boy by his shirt collar, his fur singed but his eyes burning with determination. Mark pulled the boy out, collapsing on the grass as neighbors rushed to help as the fire trucks arrived. Everyone stared, not at the flames, but at the dog once called Dangerous, who had just saved a child's life. The next morning, news of the rescue had spread everywhere. Headlines read, "Aggressive shelter dog turns hero." Cameras followed Mark and Shadow as they left the hospital, where the little boy was recovering safely. The same reporters who once warned people about dangerous dogs now wanted to know everything about the one who had saved a life. The shelter staff watched the footage in stunned silence. One of them whispered, "That's the same dog we said couldn't be saved." Guilt filled the room. They called Mark in for a reevaluation, determined to understand what they had missed. A veterinary behaviorist ran tests and soon uncovered the truth. Shadow had scars. Old ones, the kind that told stories of cruelty. His past owner had used him for illegal dog fights and punished him whenever he refused to attack. Every bark, every growl, it wasn't rage. It was fear. When Mark heard, his eyes filled with emotion. He knelt beside Shadow and whispered, "You were never dangerous. You were just hurting." Later, a journalist asked Mark why he'd adopted a dog everyone else gave up on. Mark smiled softly. "Because sometimes," he said, "the ones the world fears most are the ones who just need someone to believe in them." That night, the shelter shared Shadow's story online. Within hours, millions had watched, and thousands of people promised to give unwanted dogs a second chance. Months passed, and Shadow's story continued to inspire people across the world. Once feared, he now wore a vest that read "Therapy Dog." Each week, Mark took him to visit shelters and children's hospitals, where scared faces turned to smiles at the sight of him. One afternoon, as Shadow gently laid his head in a trembling child's lap, Mark watched with quiet pride. The same dog once labeled dangerous was now a symbol of hope. People often asked Mark how he managed to change Shadow. He always gave the same answer: "I didn't." He changed himself the moment someone believed he could. As the sun set, Shadow rested his head on Mark's knee. Together, they had proven that even the most broken souls can learn to love again.